Good morning. This is my camera. It's not the most expensive. It's not the flashiest. It's a bridge camera. It's somewhere between the click and point and the full DSLR digital single lens reflex. It doesn't have lenses that can come off and replace, but it's got it's built-in zoom lens. It can zoom right out. I can see objects at a long distance, bring them in closer with more clarity. It takes great pictures and I have great fun with it. The thing about the camera is when I'm with it, taking photos, walking around, looking at the world, I see the world differently. When I'm looking through the camera or looking to take a photo, it helps me to actually focus on the world around me. And I see things that sometimes I just don't pick up normally, wandering past, oblivious to the wonder and the beauty and the intricacy of the world. People's faces, the gum blossoms that are out at the moment, the flowers in the gardens, the trees, particularly after the rain, the different textures and colours in their trunks. Getting up to look at a sunrise, to wait for a sunset, to see the beauty of the waves and crashing down and the colours and the changes. Animals and their textures and beauty and the differences between them. I see these things clearer when I've got the camera. It helps me to see and focus on the beauty and wonder of the world that I often miss. And I guess most of us do. In the news and the busyness of life and the day, we miss what's already there before us. Let me tell you a story. There's a little boy, blonde-headed little boy, in the summer holidays. And he's walking along a creek with a stick in his hand, guiding this other piece of wood in the creek. It just looks like a boy with a stick in the river. But to him, he's the captain of a sailing boat, sailing the oceans of the world, with all the adventures of pirates and obstacles and all sorts of things. It's a world filled with wonder. And as he goes down, the creek bends and then straightens up and there's a bridge up ahead. And as he gets closer to the bridge, he sees that underneath the bridge is dark, that the sun is blocked out and it's quite dark. And as he walks closer, he can't make out. His eyes are filled with the light of the sun and he can't see what's under the bridge. And as he gets under the bridge into the darkness, he can't make out what's there. His eyes take a bit to adjust. And then eventually there's two pricks of light that materialise into two eyes and maybe a human. And as he gets closer and his eyes adjust more, he sees it's a little troll, a magic troll, with his biggest, broadest grin on its face, happy. And the troll says to the boy, "Son, what are you doing?" "Ah, I'm a sea captain, sailing the oceans, the seven seas of the world." "Oh, wow. Does that make you happy? Are you happy?" "I am, because I'm not at school and I can play out here." And the troll says to him, "Do I look happy?" And the boy looks into his face and he says, You're maybe the happiest person I've ever seen. Do you want my secret to happiness? Do you want something that will make you truly happy? The whole world will be in your grasp and you'll see wonders." He says, Yeah. And he throws him a Folgers coffee can, empty of the coffee. And the boy looks at it and the troll says, "If you fill this up with your life, you'll find happiness. When it's full, you'll be happy." So the boy runs off and he runs home and he gets all his toys and everything he can think of and he puts them into this coffee can. And he accumulates everything, photos of his parents and his siblings and adventures of his life and stories that he's read and tales and all sorts of things. And as he goes through life, he puts it into this coffee can, but it never seems to fill up. At school, he does really well and all his grades and awards he puts into the can. All his achievements, his medals and his trophies with sport and other things, he puts into the can. At college, he's doing really well and gets all these awards and puts them into the can. The money he earns from jobs, he puts the bank statements into his can. And his life is filled with with this journey upwards, and everything he gets he puts into the can, but still it's not full. He has a wife and children, a few homes and cars, and he's gaining wealth, and he puts these statements in and the symbols of all these things into this can, but it's still not full. And he gets older and richer and more famous, and he puts everything into this can, the photos with famous people and everything. And people encourage him to run for office, and he gets there and he puts those awards and ceremonies into his can, but it's still not full. He reaches an old age, and he's an elderly man, and he's about to sign a contract that will make him one of the richest, if not the richest man in the world, with lots of power and influence. And he signs the contract on his desk, and then he gets up and gets a copy and reaches for the can, the magic can that's in the cabinet near his window. He reaches in and takes a can, and he puts the copy of the contract in. It's still not full, and he wonders about it. And as he looks out at the world beyond and the city, he has a sudden heart attack, a fatal heart attack, and drops dead. And as he falls, he flings the can, and it goes out the window. And it falls to the street below, and it bounces lots of times and rolls and gathers speed as it rolls down the main street and out to the edges of the town where people live. People live more simply and humbly. And it rolls down a street and gradually begins to slow down, and it rolls, and its last act is to bump up a gutter and roll across some grass into a front yard of grass and come to a stop. And there's a little girl, and she's playing with her tea set and her dolls, and they're having a tea party, and it's a wonderful time. And she looks up and she sees this coffee can, and she runs over and picks it up. And the girl notices something that the boy never noticed, and never noticed right through his life. The can doesn't have a bottom. If the man had stopped to look, he would have noticed that all his life's possessions and achievements were forming a trail behind him. All the things he'd achieved, all the money he'd earned, all the things he'd bought, all his life's achievements were in a trail behind him. And the girl lifted up the coffee can and she looked through it, and suddenly the whole world filled the coffee can and filled her eyes, her sight. She looked up and saw the sky and the sun, the trees swaying in the breeze. She stooped down and looked at a flower which filled the whole can. She saw the birds singing. She saw her dolls and the tea set. She saw people. She saw the world. And it filled her with joy and wonder, because everything she saw was filled with wonder and joy and wonderful. She was happy. And she ran inside and showed her mother and said, "Mum, I found a magic coffee can. The whole world's inside this can, and it makes me happy." This week we read a story that's well known from John's story of Jesus. It's a story where Jesus turns water into wine. And in it, a whole lot of symbol meanings that John puts there to reveal the new thing that God is doing, the new wonders in the world. It begins by saying after the third day. For the early Christians, that meant after resurrection. After resurrection, this new thing that God is doing in the world through resurrection. It's a story of a wedding. Weddings feature prominently in the New Testament. Feasts and celebrations and festivals, the coming together of God and people in this celebration of life. It says that the wine had run out. This is the significant moment in the story. The wine had run out. A situation of great shame and dishonour. To not be able to feed and water or feed and give people their fill of food and drink was a shameful thing. People came to a wedding and they kept coming, and it was on the family to feed and provide drink for this group as long as they stayed, whoever turned up. And the broader family were responsible. And perhaps that's why Mary in the story, Jesus' mother, goes to him and says, "Jesus, do something. They've run out of wine." And he says, "My time is not yet ready," pointing to his crucifixion, the time on the cross, the moment in John's Gospel, the glorification. It is finished, he says, on the cross. My time has not come. I don't care, just do it. says Mum. And she says to the stewards, the servants, do whatever he says. Whatever he says to you, just do it. And there's 6 big stone jars sitting in a row. And they're for the jars for the water of purification. The law says that 1 cup of water is enough to purify, cleanse 100 people for worship. These are 6 stone jars that hold 20 to 30 litres. Somewhere up to 20 or 30 gallons, up to 900 litres. If a cup purifies 100 people, these would symbolically purify the world. Jesus says, fill them up. They're empty. Like the wine at the wedding that's dried up, these jars of purification, 6 of them are empty. 6 is a number of incompletion. God's number is 7, the number of completion, 7 days in a week. God worked for 6 days and rested on the 7th, the final day, the perfect number. There's only 6. These symbols are pointing to the old way, that the empty rituals that were there that no longer had life, that had been lost in the politics and power and other obsessions of life. They no longer lived. They no longer had vitality. Like the wedding that was dry, these ancient traditions had lost their way. And Jesus says, fill them up to the brim and take a cup from it and give it to the servant, the chief servant, steward. And he drinks and he goes to the bridegroom and says, what have you done? Most people put the best wine out at first, and when people have had a bit, they bring out the cheap stuff. But you've saved the very best for last. This is the very best wine, and not just that, it's 900 litres. This is an overabundant generosity, and it speaks into the overabundant generosity of God, who fills the world with awe and wonder and cleansing and healing and life, if we have eyes to see. And this is the first of the 7 signs in John's story. Signs that point to this wonder and grace of God revealed in Jesus. What do we see? Do we see, like the little girl, a world filled with wonder? Or are we stuffing our life filled with experiences and accumulation of possessions and anything else we can get to try and make us happy, like the little boy and the man? What do we see in the world? Do we see the grace of God abundant and overflowing and filling us with joy and offering healing for the world? Or are we part of the competitive violence of the world that sets ourselves apart from others, that accumulates and holds to ourselves and is filled with greed and fear and uncertainty and competition and violence? God invites us into a new way that lifts us beyond our institutions of power and complex fighting and infighting and systems that work against people and work for injustice and suit some people and oppress others. Invites us into a way of life that's rich in love, in justice, in inclusion, in hospitality, in generosity, in being together, and celebrating the life we have now rather than waiting off into the future for the happiness or whatever it is we're looking for to come. It's to live into this moment in all its fullness and recognise that God is present to us and brings life and hope for all who will receive.